It's a slow process. When we first finished the film, we invited a whole bunch of distributors in to see the movie, and every one of them said, "Well, no one's ever going to go to a movie theater to see this. You guys are crazy." And then we got a standing ovation from the crowd, which was so.
Wow.
And the guy Meyer Gottlieb, who was running things at the time, he just looks at me and shakes his head, and he goes, "Well, I still don't get it, but we want you."
Welcome, high-performing entrepreneurs and business owners. Do you suffer from shiny object syndrome? Do you often feel scattered and distracted, making it hard to implement your plan with all the ideas and strategies coming at you? Do you often wonder if you have the right goals and plan? Welcome to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood, where we help you achieve way more in less time. Get the laser focus you need so you can double your business, double your impact in the world, and be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human. Let's dive in and stay tuned at the end for your gift. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Extraordinary Focus, where we help you double your focus, double your revenue, and then double your happiness. Who doesn't want more money and happiness? And I have a very interesting guest today. I'll read his bio and then we'll get him out here. William Arntz aims to capture and share the light of the spirit through mediums like film, books, theater, and retreats. His business blossomed into multi-million-dollar productions like What the Bleep Do We Know, which was quite the pioneering work, and Down the Rabbit Hole. He later partnered with transformational leader Deirdre Haid, and they now have films in development and plan to merge art forms in retreats that explore the spirit. William Arntz, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to this. We were introduced by Barnett Bain, producer of What Dreams May Come, who was also on the show. And I said, who do you know who's a transformational leader in the entertainment industry? Because I'm doing a series focused on entertainment leaders who'd be a great guest. And he said, you. And I think he's right. You and I have already chatted a little bit. Let's start with what the bleep do we know? For people who have been in a hole and haven't heard about the movie, can you give us a little summary of what it was and what it meant at the time, like how it was breaking new ground?
Well, full title was What the Bleep Do We Know? And really, it was an exploration of science and spirituality and how they are, in many respects, saying very, very similar things. It was also, the idea was to introduce into the culture the concept of a spiritual practice that before then people had sort of said, oh, it's woo-woo. There was a lot of disparate talk about people doing spiritual work. And personally, I'd had enough of that because I'd been doing it for 20 years. And I'm like, this is not flaky, easy stuff to do. This is transformation. You're changing yourself. You're changing how you think. You're changing how you react. You're moving it to something that is hopefully better. And it's not easy to dismantle the ego and do that. So I wanted to present something, and by doing something in the language of science, nowadays people respect science, okay? The scientists know what they're talking about, more or less. So it was done in the language of science. So that was it from what I was communicating. The way it was done, it was a very unique form. Part of it is talking heads, like a documentary. Part of it was a scripted theatrical movie. We had Marlee Matlin playing the lead in it.
That's right.
That was the second element of the film. And the third element was a lot of animation. So it was this weaving, and sometimes the animation would go over the dramatic part, sometimes over the talking heads, sometimes talking heads over. So it was a very interesting weave of these three elements into one movie.
And it was groundbreaking. I think it was the first movie I was aware of, because I've been studying personal growth and spiritual development. First movie that I was aware of that attempted to be the bridge between science and spirituality. There's not this thing over here and then there's that. No, we've actually got some data to support the idea that you being mindful and focusing on yourself might be a good thing. And then also, it's all there in the title, what the bleep do we know? we are so arrogant as humans, thinking that we actually know the world. And science is showing us again and again, we actually don't. Like in some ways, we know less than we did when we started. And so I love that you did that. Talk to me about acceptance in the industry. Like when every business owner or professional can probably relate to when they're new to an industry. How do you get people to accept you? How do you get credibility? Or if you're pivoting, you might be a director or a casting director and you've done horror and now you want to go and do comedy. How do you gain acceptance?
Well, it's a slow process. When we first finished the film, we invited a whole bunch of distributors in to see the movie, and every one of them said, "Well, no one's ever going to go to a movie theater to see this. You guys are crazy." And I said, "Well, did you like the movie?" "Well, yeah, it was interesting. It was intriguing, but no one's going to go see it." So we couldn't get a distributor. So it's like, okay, well, I guess we're going to distribute it ourselves. So we went and did that, and we started doing it, and we did a whole grassroots type thing, and we had some strategies and whatnot. Anyway, about 5 months into this, it's doing really well. And there was a film out at the time, Super Size Me, about the guy who just,
Right.
remember, who eats all the burgers?
Yeah.
Um, and Samuel Goldwyn was distributing that film. And that had gotten huge PR. The guy had been on Letterman, all lots and lots of media on this. And every time we were in the same movie, we outperformed them. And so they finally called up and said, "We don't really know what you're doing, but we're intrigued." So I met with them and went to a screening together. And we went to the screening. And at the end of the screening, like often happened, then we got a standing ovation from the crowd, which was so.
Wow.
And the guy, Meyer Gottlieb, who was running things at the time, he just looks at me and shakes his head and he goes, "Well, I still don't get it, but we want you." So, success in the end, you just have to persevere with your vision. We did very, at that time, unusual marketing to get the word out to people. And then once it started to perform, they were all in. So that's kind of what you got to do. I mean, the world is full of stories of people who, they tried this and tried, that no one would buy them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Colonel
You got,
Sanders. Yeah, he went to 1,000 people to do the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he finally went to the last one. It's like, well, if this doesn't work, I'm done. I guess it was a stupid idea. That one hits, boom, there you go. So
right. Yeah. And Walt Disney went to like 300 banks and said, "I want to charge people to get into a theme park." They said he was nuts. Jack
yeah.
Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, I was like 150 publishers said no. What I love about your story is you couldn't get distribution. So instead of spending the next 10 years trying to get it, you decided we're going to do it.
Yep.
We'll do it. We'll do a grassroots movement. And the other thing I'm getting from your story is you had a hot product. So it was different. It was against the grain. But if you're getting standing ovations in theaters, then you must have made an excellent product, which I think so many business owners miss. We just do an okay thing and then we push to sell it. But is it excellent? Is it amazing? And it seems like you had something. If you didn't, if that movie was 30% less great, I'd be surprised if you would have gotten the success that you did.
Yep, we wouldn't have.
Okay, great. So we got acceptance. We've got perseverance. If they're not going to give you the standard path, you create your own path. I love that. What about, you mentioned that you got a lot of grief, that you had a lot of people loved it, a lot of adulation, but you were getting hate mail for creating something like this. Why were people sending you hate mail, and how do you handle it?
Well, I call it the culture wars. And in some respects, there was a culture war going on about the spiritual process, or let's say transformational process, or any of those sort of things. And it was really thought of as, like I said earlier, flaky or spacey, or, oh, are you going to drink the Kool-Aid? You get comments like that. And
Right.
so I had learned in my 20 years of spiritual practice, you just don't tell people what you're doing. You just hide it. You just kind of like hide it. And this was the first time where I really stuck my head above the trenches and was out there. And it pissed people off because people have their accepted views. Now, I thought I was going to get a lot of grief from religious people, because the spirituality, and we're talking about it in a very different way. Didn't hear from them. They just ignored it. I got most of the grief from journalists and scientists. Scientists in particular, they were appalled. How dare you talk about quantum physics in a movie like this? How dare you? And because it was like that's the modern priesthood. That's the thing. It's a scientist, and unless you're, published and you have all this sort of stuff in your background, you can't talk quantum theory. Who are
Right.
you? That's our stuff. You can't.
Yeah.
So the most virulent, is that the right word?
I don't know
Virulent?
how to pronounce that word.
Yeah,
Virulent
well,
might
yeah,
be.
nasty. Let's say nasty. The biggest nasty emails and stuff and communications were from scientists. I did this one interview. I was over at Cannes trying to push the movie, but they were all like, forget about it. And they set up an interview with someone in England where the movie was opening. And so I'm like, okay. So the journalist gets on there and says, oh, we have a surprise guest. They had two physicists come on the interview without telling me in order to embarrass me in front of everyone. Unfortunately for them, my first job out of college, I was a research laser physicist. So
Huh.
I knew my stuff.
Ah.
So they tried doing their game. I was like, no, that's not exactly it, and blah blah that, and a couple times I embarrassed them, and
Wow.
that's
What
that was
year did this come out? What the bleep do we know?
2004.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that was 2004. And then in the last few years, Joe Dispenza's written a book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and he talks about quantum physics. You were doing this 20 years
Yeah.
before he, because I thought he was breaking new ground, but no, you were back there in 2004 doing it. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that back in 2004, no, okay, by then I drunk the Kool-Aid. But if we went 10 years before that, I would have been one of those people saying this is a bunch of bullshit. When I first discovered landmark education, I thought they all smiled way too much and they all wore name tags. And I didn't trust anyone who was in self-help because I thought that was for people who couldn't think for themselves. They were just like out to prey on you. I didn't know that you could make a career out of trying to make people's lives better. I didn't know that was a thing. So fortunately, they managed to bust my cynicism. So by the time your movie came out, I was actually ready to watch it. And it sounds like you polarized people, which is
Yep.
good business, right? You had people loving
Yep.
it. You had people
Yeah.
hating you. Probably got some great press around it.
Well,
Uh,
we got press around it. I mean, the old thing being any publicity is good publicity, people say. So in
they
that
say
sense, we
that.
got publicity. Most of the reviews, people started calling it the review-proof movie because most of the reviews we got, people said really nasty. At one point, they said this one professor, Bill Tiller, one journalist wrote this thing that these aren't real scientists, they're all pseudoscientists. Bill Tiller is a great example of the stuff he does. It's like this guy is a professor emeritus at Stanford. Okay. You maybe have a BA in journalism and you're going to tell me he's not a scientist. I mean, it was just crazy. And I had never been exposed to the media in that direct a way. So it was a rude awakening for me, I got to tell you.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Can you say more about how you got the traction? Because in our pre-interview, you said sales and marketing was one of the big challenges. How do you get this out into the world? So for people who are trying to get their movie out, they're trying to get their book out there, they're trying to get their online product out there or their massage service, what is some of the things that you did that were successful?
Well, the big thing was for years and years, I've been heating my houses, my whatever, with wood. I build a lot of fires. And when you're building a fire, you need to start small and get it really concentrated and really hot
Right.
before you start putting more on and expanding it. So that was the model. And so when we opened in Portland, that was the first big city we opened in. It's like, okay, it's got to do well in Portland. We filmed part of it in Portland, and that was part of the reason, but partly because it was Portland. So what we did is we went around to every yoga studio in town, every health food store, anything that was alternative,
Hmm.
put up posters, had handouts sitting there when they go out, talked to the owners and invited them to a free screening. And I called them seed screenings. And the
Right.
idea is you get the influential people to come see it, then they'll go and blab to all their people. And that's what happened. So when we opened in Portland, it was a line around the block. And
Wow.
much to the theater's surprise, because they didn't even want to run it, but finally talked to them, look, just give us a weekend if it doesn't work. So a line around the block and ended up playing for 4 months there. So, the thing was that once then, okay, now Portland's cooking. Okay, Portland's cooking. Okay, now we're going to expand out to the surrounding areas around Portland. Let's get down to Eugene, Oregon, where there's a university. Let's do and get that happening, and then we'll. So it was this continual thing where you'd start in one place small, make sure that it's concentrated, so that it's standing room only, and then you start expanding out from that. And that was the one side of it. The other side of it is this is just when people were really getting into email. And so we were very fortunate that this is before the spam and all the other kind of stuff.
Right.
And people getting an email was kind of special. So because of my computer background, I said, look, we start collecting email addresses. We always get a zip code. And so when the film is playing within 50 miles of their zip code, they're going to get a little email from that.
Right.
So that started happening. Meanwhile, because email is happening for really the beginning, people started forwarding their emails to friends back in New York or wherever. And so we were just lucky that the email thing was just taking off when the film was coming out and people thought it was special.
Well, you say lucky, and I'm going to say you used what was new and available at the time. You could say Tim Ferriss was lucky to take advantage of blogs to market the 4-hour work week, but he just looked around at all the channels that were saturated and he said, let me find a channel that's not saturated yet. And he went around and built relationships with the big bloggers and gave them a copy of his book. And that's how he got way better traction than being on the Today Show. And so you had that come along, but if it wasn't email, you probably would have used whatever else was around. And I love this story that you went around to all the alternative business owners because they're leaders in their community. They host a community of people, every single one of them, invited them along, and you got a lion. And I love that as a strategy. Like wherever you're going to open, whatever product you're going to launch, have it sell out. Even if you got to limit the audience to 5 people, have it be sold out and make the fire hot before you're going to expand it. So
Yep.
you seem like you're very, not only a creative man that came up with something that was groundbreaking, but also you have some business savvy too. Would that be true? Or do you have advisors that were able to complement you with that?
Well, as far as the strategy, that was pretty much my thing. I worked with Betsy Chassie, who was one of the co-directors on the film. And we used to joke that she was a pit bull. She would just get something and she would just work it and work it and work it. So, I was kind of had the thoughts of things, but she was the one, she started implementing street teams. And street teams were like, okay, you want to be a Bleep street teamer, you blah, 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 we'll send you free paraphernalia, this, hats, whatnot. And you're going to go around and put up posters in the town and just do stuff like that. So, And that takes a fair amount of organization to get that whole thing happening. So that's really what she did, and she was relentless. That's for sure.
Wow. Wow, this is now reminding me of the Obama political campaign where they started using social media and grassroots and like, hey, be a proponent of this and go and get your people involved.
Hmm.
I love it. Um, the last thing I want to ask you about is the creative part. So you said to me in the pre-interview that it's not easy to make a really good movie.
Right.
So how do you handle, I mean, do you need a muse? How do you create something that's special and unique? Do you have any creative solutions for people out there?
Well, the reason the movie is called "What the Bleep Do We Know," of course, it's really "What the fuck do we know?"
Right.
And
I'm glad to hear you say that finally. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the reason why is the way it evolved was, like I said, Betsy had come on as a producer on the film, but she had no previous spiritual understanding of anything at all. She was just a producer. I hired her just as a producer. Turns out, as a filmmaker, she was good, but Mark and I would get into these just esoteric discussions about stuff. And we'd go off wherever, and then Betsy would be like, "Well, I don't know what y'all are talking about. Sounds like a bunch of hooey to me, but what the fuck do I know?" So she would say that. And so after about a year of that, Mark and I were three of us are trying to figure out how to weave a dramatic story in with the documentary and everything else, and that's very difficult to do. We spent a good 8 months. We try one thing, and we just couldn't do it. So we're having a meeting and we have the big whiteboard up there and we're drawing stuff. And at one point, I just started saying, "Well, we could do it this way, but what the fuck do I know?" And then Mark starts, and so we all started having a laugh. And someone, no one can remember who, says, "Maybe we should call the movie that. What the fuck do we know?" So we all had a good laugh, and we used to have this thing called bad idea days. This is another interesting technique. You're always trying to come up with the great brainstorm, the thing that everyone goes, "Oh, you try to make it the best," but every once in a while you just decide, let's just have bad idea day. Let's see who can come up with the worst idea.
Yeah.
The one where someone says it, everyone just groans, that sort of thing.
I love
So
that.
every once in a while, 1 out of 10, someone would come up with a bad idea, and there'd be that pause, and we'd go like, actually, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So anyway, someone says, "Let's call the movie What the Fuck Do We Know?" And we have a big laugh. It's our bad idea, and we figure, the next morning we'll wake up and come to, and we'll keep working on the title. Never happened. It's stuck.
Right.
And that's how we got it. So it was the idea of, the bad idea coming forth, and it actually ends up being good. The other part of the story is that the three of us, we just got broken down. We wanted to make a great movie. We really were working hard at it. We were trying everything, and we just couldn't do it. We couldn't come up with how to do it. And so you get humbled at a certain point. You're like, "Well, shit, I don't know how to do this." And so you sort of hit bottom. And then from there, once we hit bottom, little pieces started coming together. Little pieces, little pieces. What about this? What about that? What about that? And then it was suddenly like, "Oh my God, I see how to do it." And after almost a year of trying to figure out, I wrote the script in 11 days. I just wrote it and that was it. But
Oh,
that was because of all the work and all of the arguments we had had during that time. So part of it is, you got to listen to your collaborators, and at times you got to ignore them.
right. Well, I just wrote down hitting bottom is not the end of the journey.
Right. Right.
Right. It's just a step on the way. Well, this is fantastic. I've really enjoyed diving into what I think is really a classic now and was such a pioneering movie. So thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you and your latest book if they'd like to follow up?
Well, I have my company is called Captured Light, and I have capturedlight.biz is the website, and it lists the books and the movies on there. Um, the book that I wrote a few years ago was my take on the self-help movement. It's called How to Suffer in 10 Easy Steps.
I do love that title.
Yeah. So, and its claim to fame is, all the other books, how to find your true love, how to make $1 million, how to, 5% of the people who get the book actually achieve it. In this book, it's 100% because everyone suffers. So how to suffer, I get 100% hit rate. So that's my claim to fame in the self-help world.
I love it. All right, you heard it here, guys. Go to capturedlight.biz. It's not .com, it's .biz. And you can get How to Suffer in, was it 10 easy lessons?
10 easy steps.
10 easy steps. And also, Will and Deirdre have a book called The Not So Little Book of Surprises. So you can go and check that out too. And do you have an Instagram profile or something people can follow? No? Website, that's where to go. All right.
No Instagram, it's just too much.
Not yet. We'll see. We'll see. 2 years from now, you could be the leading Instagram account.
Wow.
Well, you jumped onto email fast, so maybe we'll see you on TikTok. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you. This has been great fun chatting with you.
You've been listening to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood. Now, to achieve way more in less time, to double your business and your impact in the world, and to be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human, make sure you get your gift basket. It includes a cheat sheet to double your focus, a short video to implement the steps, and a free focus audit to identify the #1 focus leak in your business and how to plug it. To get all 3 of these goodies, just go to myfocusgift.com. If you've gotten value out of this episode, tell your friends. And nothing says keep up the good work, David, like a review, which helps us climb in the rankings and reach more listeners. Now, let's be extraordinary.